What if all of a sudden, you wake up today, you start your normal day, you get ready for work, and then bam, power goes off, grid shuts down. You are left with what you have in your home, and that's it. That's all you've got. So all these people that's been telling you to prep and stockpile, some may have, some may have not. So what do you have in your home? Today's video is going to be good. We're going to talk about what accesses you have. What are the things that you're needing? What are the things that you have, or what do you have to ration? What are some amounts that would be good to have when it comes to stockpiling, just in case the grid shuts down? It could be fallout, it could be a solar flare, it could be something like a conflict that causes this issue. But it is so very close because our grid is pretty unstable. So if you woke up this morning and you realized, I was going to start a day and all of a sudden I lost power, what do you do? So let's jump into some things that would start happening, but also some things that you can start doing. This video is going to be a good one. It starts right now. Hey guys, welcome to The Max. Thank you so much for being here today. If you're new to the channel, go down here, press subscribe, ring the bell, give us a thumbs up. Remember, we do a drawing every month for our subscribers. So all you have to do to enter is just simply subscribe. So if you're new to this channel, go in and subscribe. You can be put into the drawing with all the other subscribers. Give us a thumbs up and let us know that you are a new subscriber. And if you've been here a while, hey, we'd love to hear from you. Give us your thoughts on this video. So let's jump into the content today, talking about if all of a sudden you woke up and there was no power. So number one, the grid fallout happens. First and foremost, let's assess what's going on. So at this point, you either have cell phone service or you have no cell tower service, meaning you have complete and utter loss of communication. You need to decide, okay, I've got to find out what's going on. If I can't find out by TV or radio and I can't find out by my cell phone, what are the other forms of knowing what's going on? Well, this is what's so important about communication and developing those other channels. Not saying that you'd have access to low band frequencies or to CBs or any kind of situation such as a ham radio, but these are some of the things we've talked about before by maybe having, because they may be okay and they may be able to access communication throughout the world, or at least throughout the region, depending on what kind of situation it is. So we need to find out what's going on. So communication is key. Have you got a plan on where do you meet if all of a sudden your family is in need of that location? Do you have a bug out location? Do you have a place that you can go and say, okay, this is our regional meetup, this is our community meetup? So you need to have those conversations with your family. If all of a sudden something goes down, we need to all get together, because first and foremost, we've got to get together and say, what do we need? What kind of situation are we in? Are we bugging in, bugging out? And that way you have a point of access to say, okay, this is what we've got to do. Communication is key because you've got to find out what's going on. So find the location that you're going to, find a way to find out what is going on, such as maybe ham radio, CBs, satellite phones, or some kind of a radio frequency like a walkie-talkie. All those things may shut down too. We don't know. We hope that it doesn't happen, but if all of a sudden some major EMP happens, some solar flare happens, some grid fallout, some nuclear issue, what are you going to do? So communication, making sure your loved ones get to where they're supposed to be, have that point of meetup, that would be what I would worry about first. Communication, what's going on? Let's try to find that out. At this point, I'm not as worried about leaving my property. If at all possible, I need to find out what's going on. So there may be a town square that you can go to. You would need to be, as the gray man, be very inconspicuous. The last thing you want to do is just bring attention to yourself. So this would not be my first thing of leaving my property. I want to hunker down where I'm at, especially if this is going to be the meetup place. But then once people get together, then that's where we've got to discuss, okay, what are we going to do to find out what just went on? Are a few of us going to go to town? Or a few of us going to stay here? What are we going to do to make sure that we are taking care of what we have here, but also finding out what's going on? Now, let's move on to number two. If all of a sudden this took place, we need to know how much food and water we have. We need to be putting it together to say, okay, we have this much water. We're not on a well. We're on rural water, we're on city water. That's a major concern. If we have no access to that fresh water coming out of our faucet, what are we gonna do? Part of the things that we've talked about before is prepping and making sure we have some kind of water and some kind of way of having a water to treat. So if you live in town, you live in the county, or you live in an area that is on community water, you better have a way to then turn around and have fresh water or have water stockpiled, or you have a way to make water clean. If that's boiling it or if that's some kind of filtration system, you better have that in plan already. If you have a well, you need a hand pump. We've done a video on our hand pump that we personally have. So now we're worried about food and water. We're trying to assess where we're at. We're trying to bring everybody into the meetup spot. We're trying to see what's going on, but now we need to talk food and water. So water is key. Do you have water put up? This video should help you say, you know what? I'm not prepared. What if all of a sudden this does happen? If you don't have water, you won't make it. So if you're not putting up water, you better have a way to access water. If you have a river, creek that's close and it's not contaminated, or you know that it's safer to drink, great. If you have a hand pump water well, great. But for the people who live in the city and the county, you better be putting up water. Now, how much water do we put up? No matter what, you think about every person in your family times 1 gallon a day. Now that doesn't mean we're gonna use a gallon a day. We should be drinking that much, but in a ration situation, we're not. But we gotta remember hygiene's important. We gotta remember drinking's important, and also rehydrating our food's important. So if you're saying, okay, I don't know what the situation is, but there's 4 people, there's 6 people, there's 10 people that need to live off the water that we have, you better have whatever number of people you have times 1 gallon per day that you're planning to prep out, bug out, or be safe. We don't know how long a grid would be down, but studies show if a grid goes down across the US, it would take months, maybe even years to get it back up and running. So you better be stockpiling water pretty quickly, and you better have some kind of way to store it. It's not going to be best to store it in the gallon jugs that you get at Walmart or in bottled water. Now that's not a bad situation, but you need to look at some other options of true water storage, because that's going to keep your water safe. It's going to help it to be treated if you have to treat it. A lot of these things come with spigots on it where you can use it, ration it. Water is key. Now food. What food do you have? Remember, if the power is off, then you've got to eat what's in the fridge first. Now keep your freezers closed. Now at this point, you better have some food put up. We've talked about this in several videos, but if you don't have 3 to 6 months at least worth of food, you are going to be a sitting duck. Now, how can you rehydrate the food? Well, you have to have the water, so water is key. For the food that's in the freezer and the refrigerator first, you work from the refrigerator, you ration, you eat what you can out of that first. Then you maneuver to the freezer. Doesn't mean you like what you're eating, but you better utilize those things first, because you may not have another alternative energy source to run those items. And even if you did, you don't want to waste it on those fridges and freezers. So then you start accumulating, and you looking through your pantry to start building meals that you can ration. You start talking about canning food. You talk about the proteins, the carbs, and the oils, the fats, and making sure that you can say, okay, if we're here for several days, weeks, or months, we need to have a game plan on rationing our food. So if you have not put up food, this is the time to do it before something like this would actually happen. 3 to 6 months at minimal per person. You can buy freeze-dried foods from Legacy Food Storage or My Patriot Supply. There's links below. But if you can't, you need to start piling up canned goods, cured foods, dehydrated, freeze-dried foods. You never want to go without food in your pantries. Please, people, start stockpiling food, because without food and water, all this other stuff we talk about, it's going to be worthless. And don't depend on someone coming to save you. Remember, we live in a society with about 350 million people across America. So if that's the case, don't depend on the government or anyone else to come and save you. So you better be putting up food, making sure you have a 3 to 6 month supply for each person. Now, we've done a video on how much someone can eat. So we need to base this off caloric intake and making sure that we're getting a rationed amount, but a daily caloric amount that could keep us sustained. So we could take a teaspoon of oil in, or a teaspoon of fat in, and it's not the best tasting, but again, it gives us calories and gives us kind of an energy boost. This is where peanut butter and things like that, a single scoop would allow you to sustain for a period of time. Do a good helping, a good dollop of peanut butter, you're anywhere from 180 to 250 calories per tablespoon, or 2 tablespoons, depending on what kind you're eating. So things like that has a lot of carbs and a lot of fats in it are good, but you have to have proteins as well. So you need to make sure that you have oils and fats for energy. You need to have carbs for energy and to rebuild and restructure your body. Proteins, again, to make sure you are strong and ready to go. So a balanced diet is very, very important. So if you haven't been stockpiling food, this is a good time, because if all of a sudden you don't have food and water, what are you gonna do? What does it matter? What are you protecting? You have to learn to protect those things, but if you don't have them, no one's worried about it, and you're gonna be dependent on someone to come and save you, and that is not a good scenario. So now we've talked communication, we've talked food and water. What's next? Let's talk about security, self-defense, and making sure we can protect our home and protect the goods that we have worked so hard to put up. If you have doors and you have windows, you need to be securing them at this point, because at any point in time, it's not about what you've done, it's about keeping it safe from everyone else in the world. Now, this is gonna be a hard thing to do, but you've gotta remember, grace and mercy are good, and we want to help people when we can help them. But you've worked hard to put your preps up. The last thing you want to do is lose it all to theft, thievery, and anyone trying to steal it because they did not play their cards right and actually prep like they were supposed to. We think this is crazy, and people say, oh, EMPs will never happen, solar flares will never happen, nuclear will never happen. You don't know that. And the more pressure we put on the grid, because we're coming away from fuels, the more we're going to cause issues and volatility in the grid. You don't believe that some of the adversaries in this world would want to hurt our grid because ultimately they know it hurt America? Absolutely. And again, don't go and think that the government is going to come in and get it up and running. The other day, an oak tree fell on one of our lines that runs one of our buildings on our property. One oak knocked down 4 lines. It took them over 24 hours to actually get it up and running and put back. That was for 2 customers. 2 customers. Think of it on a scale of millions and millions and millions of people. Do you honestly believe you're gonna see a grid back up and running within a few days? No. So you better make sure you have communication going and finding out what's going on. Food and water to make sure you can ration and put enough up for you and your family, because that is independence. That is where you're not going out and looking. The last thing you want to do is put yourself in a vulnerable spot going to look for food instead of actually having it. And then thirdly, you've got to protect it. You've worked hard for it. If you're not putting up hundreds of rounds of whatever self-defense tool or brass that you like, you better start buying it. Right now, brass and self-defense tools have went back down a little bit, but there is a major push against that from our government. So therefore, you better, while you can, start stockpiling and putting these things up. Now, you need to make sure that you're putting them up in ammo cans like they're supposed to be put up. You need to make sure you have a safe that you can put them in, and you need to be safe with them, understanding by educating yourself on what you have. But you have to protect what you've got. And self-defense is a big deal, especially during a time of a grid collapse, because when a grid collapse, society collapse. Studies show within 24 to 48 hours of a grid collapse, where people know it's a total grid collapse, people will lose their minds. Next would be hygiene and medicine. This is where the most vulnerable will struggle and may see loss of life. We have to realize that hygiene, contamination, and the sick amongst us that is on daily medicine or weekly medicine or monthly medicine, this is going to be the most trialed group of people. These are the ones that's going to face the most issues. So I would challenge you, start buying over-the-counter meds, putting them up. Now, for some of you, you've heard us talk about Jace Medical. Jace Medical is several sets of antibiotics that you can put up for safety for bacterial infections or any kind of infection that you may have that could be beneficial to you. You need to look at the Jace case. But not only that, right now you have Jace Medical that does like what they call Jace Daily, and there's a few other companies that probably do it as well. But they are offering those survival medicines. If you're a diabetic, if you have some health issues that you are needing medicine on a monthly basis, you can buy up to 12 month supplies from Jace Daily. All you have to do is go to their website. There's a link below. You need to check. You can get 10% off by using our discount code, but you don't realize how important medicine is. If you can't have access to it, what are you going to do? If you live off this medicine, what are you going to do? It's important. So you better be buying over-the-counter meds. You better be buying prescriptions such as antibiotics to have, because right now they're in shortage already. So say all of a sudden something goes wrong, you're in even a worse situation to try to help your sicknesses. But then thirdly is the Jace Daily. You need to be looking at some kind of way to put up 12-month supplies of monthly medicines that you take. If you're taking a daily pill, you need to check that out and see what they offer, especially people like your diabetics and patients that deal with the heart and thyroid, all that. They deal with all that. Check them out below, because I think if you don't have a plan for your prescriptions or your medicines, they will be the ones most vulnerable, and they'll be the ones to struggle the most, and that is going to be hard to see and watch, especially if they're your family members. Alternative energy is the next one. If we don't have the grid, do you have some kind of solar bank? Do you have some kind of generator? Do you have enough propane put up for that generator? We've talked about this before. You know, there's little propane tanks you can buy for grills. First of all, you need a gas grill and a charcoal grill always on your property, no matter if they're a little small, kind of a backpack kind, or the kind of like little burners that you just put on top of the propane tanks. You need to have some form of alternative cooking mechanisms, if that be propane, natural gas, or simple charcoal or wood. That's okay too, but you better have a plan there. If you don't have that plan, you better have a solar array of a battery bank that you can turn around and charge back up if the sun does come back out, if it's not something major like that. But if the sun comes back out, you can recharge this alternative energy, and making sure that you have a way to cook your food or a way to heat up your food. Here's another thing you got to think about. Remember, if all of a sudden the grid goes down, you have trash, you have toiletries, you have sewage, you have all this waste. What are you going to do with it? Well, I don't say you want to light it on fire, but if worse comes to worse and you have to get rid of trash, you have to get rid of contaminants, sometimes the only way to do it is cleaning by fire, meaning you need to have a way to, you can maybe get rid of some of these things and these contaminants, because that contaminants could cause you more hygiene and bacterial unhealthiness, which will cause you more sickness. So you've got to get rid of these toiletries, or you've got to get rid of these contaminants some way. Propane and gas could also help you that way. Fire, wood, charcoal, those things could help. I know that sounds crazy, but if you think about it, people like us that live in the county and live in the country areas, you'll be okay, because you can pretty much go into your woods and figure it out. But what about the people in town? If your sewage is backing up, what are you going to do? So we got to get rid of contaminants in some form or fashion. We have to make sure that if we don't have a fireplace to get rid of some of the trash, to burn it, you need to find a way to get rid of it by getting it away from your property. Now, you can't help the sewage issue, but there may be a way that you can turn around and have alternative energy to cook, or to get away, or to move, or to bug out. You could take this alternative energy, you could take propane, you could take gas, and get away from where this contaminant is. Now, if you're in the city, this is, again, a vulnerable time for you, because it's hard for you to store up propane or gas. It's hard for you to store up some kind of wood or ash, and most of you don't have chimneys, and you are dependent on the sewage system actually working when it comes to cities, apartments, and bigger areas. They need energy to run too, and run those pumps. So this is one of those cases where alternative energy and propane and gas is important, not only for your car, not only for your cooking, but if you had to leave, you could have that little battery bank to go wherever you need to go to bug out, to be as safe as possible, to get to a place where you can still cook, you can still use the solar battery bank, you can still use the propane, but you need to try to get to some kind of safety and some kind of security. Goes back to the plan with communication on the front end, where to go as a meetup point. All that matters when you talk about this. It's a lot to think about. If you're in some of these areas, if you're a vulnerable older person, if you're in these cities and in these apartments, if you're in these high rises, or if you're on some kind of community water or community sewage, these kind of problems will actually cause you more issues if you don't have a solution to some of these situations. So you have to think outside the box. One day, just sit down and say, if something were to happen today, let me write down everything that I would need. My daily medicine, my daily food, even if I rationed it, I have to eat, I have to drink. What would I need to take care of my family? Can I protect it? Do I have something to protect our doors and windows? Do I have a way to protect myself? Do we have the medicines that we are needing? Do we have the oxygen we are needing? Can we buy an extra respirator? Can we buy some kind of face covering for safety if we get into a bind with bad air outside? If the quality of air is bad, how are you going to cook outside? Things to think about. That's why it comes down to the alternative battery banks and the solar generators that do store power that you can turn around and utilize indoors if you ever needed to. Lastly is money. I challenge you, do not leave in any situation. If you don't have to leave your property, don't. If you're at that meetup place and everybody's together, the last thing you want to do is have to leave. But if you have to, and you have to buy goods, and you have to find ways to, substitute any of these things that we've talked about, you're going to have bartering goods. And bartering goods are things that you are willing to depart from. So this wouldn't be your self-defense tools unless you had plenty of it. This wouldn't be your food or water if you needed gas. We need to protect what is important. It wouldn't be our medicines. Now, if you have excess and extras of all these, then yes, you can utilize those. But it comes down to making sure you have a plan. So cash, precious metals, antiquities, also other bartered goods such as extra foods that you've put up, maybe extra tools or mechanical tools or some kind of skills that you have that you can help someone else out and they can barter goods to you. It comes down to you've got to find a new base of currency. If you are working as a community, you have your core group that is securing your property, your home, your bug-in location. At some point in time, you will have to leave. And you will have to form a new style currency, which would go back to a bartering system like olden days, or a cash or precious metals situation. Now, when people say, oh, it won't be any good. Well, one day it will be. So in 3 to 6 months or a year or 2 years, someone is going to be racked up with a lot of precious metals and cash. And at some point in time, someone's got to make that good, or we are living in the end of days anyways. So you have to have another way of paying for something, or bartering something, or having skills to barter yourself to get the goods that you're needing that you will have to substitute. We can only ration so long, and we can only put up so much. So then it comes back to, what can we do for ourselves? What can we barter? What have we learned? What is our skill sets? What can we do as a group to work together to then turn around and bring in new bartering skills or new goods that we can turn around and barter from some of the stuff that we have stockpiled and put up? Now, is any of this happening? I don't know. I hope it doesn't. This is what I always say about prepping and survival. Prepping and survival is insurance. It is literally crap hits the fan insurance. I have life insurance, I have health insurance, I have car insurance, I have other forms of supplemental insurance. I don't want to use either one of those. If I use life insurance, it's over for me. If I use health insurance, and especially big major medical health insurance, I've had a major catastrophic event. If I use auto insurance, I've had wrecks or we've had something go wrong with our cars. So you get what I'm saying? We don't want to use our insurance. Well, the good thing about prepping and survivalship, unlike all these other insurances, you feel like you pay it and all of a sudden if you don't use it, you're glad you're not using it, but you feel like you wasted money. Well, with prepping goods, you're always able to use these things and rotate out of your stockpile. You need to have these things put up to cover for inflation, interest, and supply chain issues anyways. There's shortages going on. So if you have all these things and you don't use any of those for an EMP, that's great. What are you complaining about? You're glad this didn't happen. But if you have all these things and something bad does happen and we have a crap hits the fan situation, societal collapse will take place and it will be hard and people will suffer. But you will have a better shot of making it because you have taken the proper protocols and the proper steps to protecting you and your family. And we've talked physical, mental, and making sure financially you're taking care of yourself. Now, I didn't say anything spiritually, but spiritually is the most important. We've even seen with the lockdowns that we've already had the last few years, people almost lose their mind. We've seen a lot of prescriptions be on shortage, and that's caused a lot of issues. We've seen drug uses and we've seen abuse of prescriptions. We see people have vices that cause major struggles. All that gets worse if all of a sudden something really bad happens like an EMP or a grid shuts down. So spiritually, you need to be ready for this. Now again, we're Christians, so we believe that there's a higher calling anyway. We believe in God, but he also gives us smarts to say, you know what? You have to prepare. I think of Joseph, and I brought this up in several videos. God showed Joseph that it was not going to get any better. He showed him a dream with fat cows and skinny cows. And it was basically showing you have 7 good years and you have 7 bad years. Now, Joseph could have said, yeah, I know, well, cool dream, nightmare, I don't know. But no, he took wisdom and he sought knowledge and he found ways to then stockpile and put up major amounts of food. And what did it do? It allowed the people to live when the drought and the famines came. That's history. No matter if you're a Christian or not, that is history if you look back in the times of Joseph. So God gives us wisdom and knowledge to say, you know what? Let's make wise decisions. Let's prep and take care of our families and make sure that we're putting up goods for the insurance, like we talked about, just in case. I'd like to know that I have a chance. I have a chance that I don't have to depend on anyone else, and I could be independent and take care of my family. The worst thought for me as a man, but also as a husband and father, is something to happen to my children or to my spouse, and I didn't do anything about it. So for me, spiritually, again, as a Christian, I want to take care of ourselves spiritually, but physically and mentally, I want to make sure that I'm doing all I can to take care of my family. And that's what we all should be doing. Thank you so much for watching this video. This was one of those videos that sometimes it's hard to make, but it's the what if. What if all of a sudden you woke up, you ate breakfast, and the power went off? And the power didn't go off just because you had a little storm or a little oak tree fall on your line. It went off indefinitely. What do you have in your home? What plans do you have instilled and put in place if that were to happen? And if you don't have all this plan started, it's time to work on it. Gain wisdom, seek knowledge. God bless. Happy Hosted.